Hello everybody and welcome back to the 29th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I am one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How we doing this week, Tim?
Doing well. Got a homeboy Bub up to 60. Been doing some Alterac Valley with him. That's been fun. I need the honor anyways. Dude, it's crazy. My honor cap's like 256,000. His honor cap right now is like 45,000. It's just I didn't know you couldn't grind.
He's like what like rank 5 or something like that?
He's rank 2. He's rank 2. He's gotta be rank 5, I think, after it or something. But the grind is real, man. Even if I max out my honor, I think I only go halfway to the next rank. So yeah, I want that armor though.
I was gonna say, how cool do you want to look moving into TBC?
Well, I want to copy my character. I want to get that armor, copy my character, have him just on classic, ready to go. I can just run around, kill some people, you know, just vibe out on it.
Legendary guy. Okay.
Ooh, I got my engineering up. I went gnomish engineering. I learned all the things that are bind on pickup for them. And then I'm gonna drop it and then level my shit up goblin engineering. So I'm being a little sweaty. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. What about you, big dog?
I have mostly been grinding retail. I've got all of my Dragonblight reps up to their max levels now, and I've just been doing some stuff to get some of the mounts that have been left over in those zones before I move on to like Shadowlands and stuff like that. Oh, Shadowlands. But
are we skipping Shadowlands on this channel?
No, we're not skipping Shadowlands,
are we getting into
but
it?
We're gonna fucking agonizingly crawl through it. And everyone here, whether they're a new player or old, will understand just why I hate it.
Can we just make it like an episode, two episodes long?
It's gonna be a 5-segment expansion. No, unfortunately, they like to butcher a lot of our favorite characters in that expansion, so we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, we hit 1,000 followers over on TikTok, which was awesome, and my lovely fiance got me the Dragonblight Codex hardcover, so
it was you sent a picture. It looked nice.
Oh, dude, it's so sick, and it's really helpful because a lot of I have a lot of the images from like the Chronicle and stuff like that. But I don't have everything that they have in this. And it's also just good to get that little side info because these aren't really available anywhere besides physical copies. So I'm super happy to have that. And thank you. Shouts out to her. But I think that's pretty much all that I've been doing. I haven't been up to too much this last week. Yeah. But last week we talked about a lot of the final stuff of the Ice Crown area that leads into the Ice Crown Citadel. What do you remember about last week, Tim?
Well, I know we initially talked about Syndragos and like his raising of her. And we're basically talking about just all of Ice Crown, like Arthas and his gain of power, loss of humanity. I mean, we talked a little bit about his heart even in that cool side quest you do, where you literally find his heart like it's near Ice Crown Citadel, but somewhere in Ice Crown, right?
Yeah,
and right. And didn't we destroy it?
Yep. Tyrion is like, did you forget that I am the embodiment of retribution? He just fucking obliterates that thing.
We talked about the Argent Crusade, kind of like the Horde and the Alliance trying to like get some camaraderie going because God knows their whole fight in the Ice Crown. Like anytime you see a glimmer of hope, it like got shot down. And the Argent Crusade was kind of like trying to get everyone together, get their spirits up. But of course, you know, that gets crashed. That's why there's the Trial of the Crusader.
Yep.
And then we talked about our way, the final push through Ice Crown into the Citadel. It truly did feel like that, man. You're going through the gates. You see the Argent Crusade like building up camp in the base of the Citadel, and we make our way through, you know, or you don't, right? Until we get to the Lich King, where it is found out this was his whole master plan to get the 25 top people, right, to try to kill him. And then he actually kills us. But that was his plan, but he doesn't, right? You know, Tyrion comes out, smites him down with Ashbringer, and it's over. I guess GG's. All right.
Yep. Well, Frostmourne is shattered. All the souls that were stuck inside of it basically give Arthas one last fuck you as they're on their way out. And then you also have the soul of his father, Arthas's father, Tyrannus, telling you there must always be a Lich King.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Tyrion looking down at the helm before Bolvar's like, nah, dog, it's me. I'm him. And yeah, he becomes the new Lich King, the new jailer of the damned, to keep control over the Scourge so they don't wash over the land of Azeroth, allegedly. And that is, for the most part, yeah, where it's at. And then we talked a little bit about some of the possessions that you can find on Arthas and how they pertain to the people that go back to them, like Sylvanas and Jaina and those major figures in Arthas's existence. Also, from last week, we did have a few comments that we wanted to highlight on this episode, starting with Meru Emperor is what I'm going to assume it is, saying, I'm glad last episode was recommended to me a couple of days ago. Keep up the good work. Thank you so very much. We do appreciate your kind words. And we're also quite happy that YouTube managed to find you our content. So thank you for coming along for some more episodes, and we're excited to have you aboard. We did also have, over on Spotify, Andy Hall saying, the Wrathgate bro, this moment has stuck with me forever. And we're going to talk about it a lot more as we go into this episode, because this is kind of going to be a recap episode. Not recap, but just kind of Tim and I's more personal thoughts about some of these expansions. But yeah, no, Wrathgate is, like, I even remember before I played World of Warcraft, my friend who did play World of Warcraft showing me the Wrathgate cinematic and like breaking it down for me, like, no, you have to understand, those guys have always hated those guys, so this even happening is crazy. And I'm like, so I'm excited to talk more about that as we do get into this episode. But lastly, for our comments, we did also have the returning The Away Fan saying, personally, I've never been a fan of the help me I'm dying, please go fetch these items to make a potion and make me well again mission type. However, after hearing this is based on a real person and still had a realistic ending, I kind of enjoyed it. It was effective and a good send-off. He did also ask a few questions, just saying, is the area still accessible? What's there now? Is it only through the lore and reading the credits that you're aware of this? Tim said that he didn't know it was based on a real person. Perhaps adding some sort of signpost or tombstone with some info would be appropriate. Cool episode as always, dogs. And I did look into this. Unfortunately, the Silent Vigil is still just a empty campsite after his body disappears following the blessing of a doll and him being taken away to the afterlife. So not much has changed in regards to that, but I do also think it is cool because Blizzard actually does often add a lot of like NPCs and stuff like that for people who have passed away, or some sort of memorial and something like that, which I think is good, but I also don't necessarily think it's necessary to have it have like an actual tombstone. I think the quest in itself kind of evokes enough emotion to be like, oh, that, you know, even if you didn't know the backstory of it, like if you were maybe experiencing something similar to that, it would, you know, relate to the player however much. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel, ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. So, like I had mentioned in the comments section, this episode is going to be pretty different from the previous episodes that we've done, where it's almost strictly a single lore story that we're focusing on, if not a couple lore stories. This time we're going to be taking a look back and kind of doing a nice little wrap-up of both the TBC expansion and the Wrath of the Lich King. I actually had the desire to do this after we finished doing TBC, and we ended up moving directly into Wrath, and it felt like, I don't know, that there could have been some more that we could have talked about in between TBC and Wrath. So we're going to try this out. Hopefully it's going to be a fun conversation that you guys maybe feel inclined to join in with us. And starting off, I believe that Tim and I have both made lists for what we are planning to do today, which is we're going to rank the zones of Outland for the Burning Crusade and the zones of Northrend for the Wrath of the Lich King based on two different categories. First being the gameplay aspect of it and how much like the atmosphere of the zone and the actual playing experience of it felt. And then also ranking it by the lore significance and how much we personally feel like this really impacts the story in a great way, or even if it just personally affected us in a way that we like the lore for this area. That is kind of how we're looking to structure this out.
The way I'm really rating them is for the gameplay aspect. How did it feel at the time? You know, because we've had a re-release of this game pretty recently that we both played TBC. Your reflection of TBC before that is you just leveled through it because you started in what, Kata?
And a Kato start and miss, yeah.
Right, and mine, I started at the end of TBC. I got to 55 right when Death Knights and Wrath came out, and I remembered I made a Death Knight, but I didn't really experience, TBC back in the day, but I did Wrath. So I'm going to be kind of just putting my perspective of, what I liked as a player, and because of that, what I rated, And
I will say both of us have played to max level in the classic re-releases of both the Burning Crusade and the Wrath of the Lich King. The only experience I have with a more genuine experience of that time period of the game, but like Tim said, he also has the back in the day for Wrath of the Lich King for sure, as well as a little bit of TBC. So I think it'll be interesting to see how we both individually rank these and what is more influential on one of us as opposed to the other. So I'm excited to get into this. So starting off, we're just going to start with gameplay. We're going to start in Outland and make our way into Wrath of the Lich King for gameplay afterwards. But we're going to go from worst to best zones in terms of their gameplay. And Tim, I want you to kick us off. What do you have as the worst zone gameplay-wise for Outland?
Shadowmoon Valley, dude. You don't even go to Shadowmoon Valley until you're max. I don't even remember doing quests there because of that. There's some good things about Shadowmoon Valley. You get the vibe, dude. All the demons, did you see the fell waterfalls that are just pouring directly off of Shadowmoon Valley into space? That's cool.
That is
cool. That stuff is cool, but that's all it's got. It's just demons and the Black Temple. And I really don't remember doing any memorable quests there because you're pretty much max before that. So, and then there is, of course, the iconic Netherwing Drakes. So that does give it points, but that's pretty much the only points it's got is Black Temple, demons, Netherwing Drakes. Well, that's why it's last on my list.
I was right there with you almost for a second, and then I did remember the Netherwing quest, and I really did enjoy doing the Netherwing quest, and maybe it's the nostalgia, which I'm not gonna lie, like I said, these are all personally biased. There is no right or wrong in terms of which is the best to worst, but I just being going through and collecting all of those eggs and all of that to finally get my Netherwing Drake felt like one of the first major accomplishments I ever did in World of Warcraft. So I love the Shadowmoon Valley a bit more than last place, at least, because over on my side for the worst leveling experience in Outland, I think is the Hellfire Peninsula. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna hold my tongue, but keep going.
I don't think that it's a very interesting area. It's just kind of a bigger blasted lands. I get what they were kind of going for with the PvP sort of element of it, and it does feel good for that. But other than that, most of the stories that go on within the actual quests don't feel significant at all. They don't feel like they lead into anything, and most of the actual questing experiences that you do in there that lead to more major quests tend to take you out of the zone where I would consider the more meat and bones of the quests actually occur. It just kind of feels like this in between to get you from being in classic gear before you'll actually enter into Outland. Not a fan of it.
That is wild. I'm not gonna spoil what mine is, but mine is pretty high on the list for Hellfire. So I'll give you my reasoning later.
I'm so curious. And I will say that the dungeon, I guess it kind of just feels like a dungeon hub mixed with a PvP battleground. And outside of that, the actual quests don't feel significant to me. But I'm curious to see what you have to say later. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch back over to you with the number 6, so second worst zone in the Burning Crusade. What do you think?
Blade's Edge Mountain. Again, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I was just doing too many dungeons, but I'm thinking back to the classic release as well. I didn't really level through Blade's Edge Mountain. Now, saying that, I flew through all these zones to make the list, but we're speaking based off of gameplay, but the vibe of Blade's Edge is crazy, dude. You have impaled black dragons through all the spikes that are throughout the mountains. Dude, that is cool. There is a severed head of a huge black dragon literally pinned underneath a bridge that you fly underneath. Like, that's cool. Gruul's Lair? I mean, dude, I remember how hard Gruul's Lair was, like, when we were playing? Given we probably weren't that good at that point.
I mean, I remember how hard it was to get as many people as needed to fucking line up and be coherent.
Well, you
for
also...
the 6th hour.
You needed, like, a mage tank. What you, like, spell steal something, and then you tank a mob because you do so much damage, and you want to, like, stack a lot of stamina because of that.
I have heard
so that was cool.
Despite me playing mage, I wasn't cool enough to do it.
That was cool. I've seen it. I've done Gruul's Lairs where we've done that tactic. So thinking of just gameplay wise for that raid, and it was a short raid given, but that fight where you have to fight like all the ogres before Gruul, that was a pretty fun fight. I mean, it was hard, but it was fun. It's not just tank and spank, you know, just hit Frostbolt. But other than that, the big thing is I just feel like the quests aren't compact. You don't really go there for the questing. You're really just going to Blade's Edge for Gruul's Lair. And because of that, for the gameplay wise, that's why it ranks really low for me.
Understandable. Mine is pretty close to this rank, but the number 6 spot, I have the Zanger Marsh for my second to worst leveling experience in TBC. And I just want to be clear, I love the vibe of Zanger Marsh, and I think the vibe is the only thing that put Zanger Marsh over top of Hellfire Peninsula for me, because I do like the nighttime feel with all these glowing mushrooms and stuff like that. It's cool. I just hate actually questing through there. There's a bazillion mobs everywhere. There's a ton of water that you constantly have to go negative 1,000 speed to get through. Even getting into the Serpent Shrine caverns is a pain in the ass. Or the Coil Fang Reserve, rather. It's just like, the vibes alone do not save me on the Zanger Marsh, despite how aesthetically pleasing it is. The actual playing experience, in my opinion. It also does feel like another one of those zones where it comes like right after Hellfire, where a lot of the quests lead into more major quests in the next zones that are kind of higher on my list as well. But with that, we're going to move into our number 5 position of the worst to best zones for gameplay in the Burning Crusade. What do you have at number 5, Tim?
At number 5, I have a Terokar Forest. And we're starting to get to the better zones where, like, all these zones forward, I thoroughly enjoy. So Terokar Forest, a lot of people forget that is also where Shattrath City is, which means it falls into this category as well. So I do like choosing between Aldor and Scryer. I think that was a cool first time, like, really WoW has done something like that, where like your choice impacts gear, which is a big thing, right? And Shattrath City, dude, I'll talk about it in the lore, but Shattrath City is an amazing city. I love that it shows the poverty in Shattrath City. I'll talk about it later, but it's something that WoW doesn't really do. It doesn't show the harshness of the world like it does in TBC. So overall vibe of Terokar Forest, also, you have Auchindoun, right? The dungeons in Auchindoun do 4 different dungeons, right? You get Ravenlord that drops from one of those, right? But also the fights are pretty diverse, and I feel like I liked all of those dungeons as well. And then the last thing in Terokar Forest was, dude, the dailies for the Skyguard mount. You remember those?
I do remember them.
In Skedis.
It's one of those stories that I think we could discuss a little bit more, but yes, the Arakoa and the whole shadow zone and everything going into basically an alternate dimension was a really fun concept for what were, at the time, usually pretty boring rep grinds and stuff like that.
But there wasn't that many quests in Terracar Forest, I will say. Like, a lot more in Hellfire, Nagrand, Zangarmarsh.
There's a decent amount, I think, in the Bone Wastes.
Yeah,
right outside of
into
Auchendoon.
Auchendoon. Yeah. But really, other than that, I guess there is an Alliance outpost, too. I guess there is.
At my number 5 position, I was right behind you here. The Blade's Edge Mountains comes in at number 5 for me. Like Tim said, the vibe of the Blade's Edge Mountains is really cool. And if I was factoring the lore into it, it definitely would take it to a lot higher of a place. But other than that, it's a pain in the ass to navigate if you don't have flying already. You fight like 3 different enemy types in total, it feels like. You're fighting just an ogre, you're fighting a Nagrand, or you're fighting some sort of dragon or something like that. And that is about all you're fighting. And yeah, I'm not a fan. Like when Tim said that it's kind of like you never really want to go there to quest, I remember I went there to quest after I had already hit max level just so that I could make money off of doing quests. That's the only reason I ever ended up doing them back in TBC anyway.
And how was it?
I mean, at that point, because I had flying, it wasn't as bad as when I think I initially had done it while I was just like leveling through actual World of Warcraft. But if I hadn't, I'm sure that I would still think significantly more negatively of this location. I will say there are a lot of cool quest lines where you have like these super big bosses and stuff like that, like the summoning quest, I think, for Gruul or one of his sons. But outside of that, most of the locations are forgettable. Most of the quest lines are pretty forgettable. The Rexxar quest line is probably the only one I would even consider to be memorable. And I feel like most people will even forget about that one. So that is where I have the Blade's Edge Mountains at number 5. And moving down to number 4, Tim, what's your number 4?
Netherstorm, man. I mean, we're getting higher on the list. Again, I feel like I'm sent to Netherstorm when I'm done with questing, right? But I didn't like that, but I like you, liked money. And so I was doing all the quests. But when you get to Netherstorm, you see the ecodomes, and the ecodomes are really cool, man. Apparently, like, Netherstorm was like almost like an island, like a tropical island. And after the Sundering and whatever the Sundering equivalent it was for Outland,
the destruction of Draenor.
Yeah, these ecodomes are the last like remnants of what Netherstorm truly was. So that's pretty cool. These domes, I hope you include them in some video in the podcast because they look so cool. You like go through a force field, these purple force fields, which is all arcane energy, right? And you get to see like how unstable arcane energy is in Netherstorm, which is pretty cool. The 3 dungeons, dude, which is all a part of the Naru ship, and it had decent gear, I remember as well. Ashes of Alar in Tempest Keep, dude. This is a zone that has one of the most... one of the most iconic mounts in the franchise, right? So you gotta rank Netherstorm kind of high on the list. And then the last thing, everyone likes the Fel Reaver. But did you know there's a Void Reaver? He's guarding Kael'thas. So I thought that was pretty cool as well.
Again, so close. But now that I know what the bottom half of your list looks like, I'm kind of shocked and I'm so excited to get into this. My number 4 spot, I have Shadowmoon Valley. And I liked it for a lot of the reasons that I kind of previously mentioned, where I really did enjoy the Nether Dragon storyline, even some of the quest lines that lead into it, where you're going into like this dragon maw keep to slay them and to free this dragon. Sometimes you gotta, I think there's another defense quest that you gotta do up there. It's just a cool, like, kind of, I believe it's an elite area. And on top of that, there is the Terran Gorefiend quest, which I do find quite memorable. And even if at the end of the day, when I know the bigger details about it, I'm like, God, we're idiots. But doing the actual quest line itself and then actually like getting chained to this thing and fighting as this like spectral prisoner, I thought was really cool. Even if it is kind of a cop-out, in my opinion, for bringing back Terran Gorefiend. But it does also have to be mentioned that, I mean, Black Temple. Like, Black Temple does earn this location a lot of points. I've mentioned it before that I don't actually aesthetically like much of the Shadow Moon Valley in the Burning Crusade, just because it's so samey everywhere. It all looks pretty much exactly the same, so I'm not a huge fan of that. But the Black Temple itself, just like iconic. The fight with Illidan on top of the pyramid, as you know, you hopefully finally get your Warglaze of Azeroth. It's really cool. I also think well, I guess I can't mention that part, but the greater implications that the Black Temple has further down into the story does make a lot of the stuff that we do previously feel more valuable to me. So I did put Shadow Moon Valley up here.
That's crazy. That's my lowest rank. Dude, it's the aesthetic of demon throw up, and then you have the Black Temple, and that's all it is. That's all it is.
But that does move us into our top 3 zones in terms of gameplay for Outland. Moving into number 3, and what do you have, Tim?
Bro, Zanger Marsh, which is crazy. You don't like Zanger Marsh as much. So of course you start in Hellfire, which I'll get to Hellfire eventually. And then making your way into Zanger Marsh, you're on a ground mount still, and it's a huge change in aesthetic. You make your way towards Zanger Marsh, and you see these thorns poking out of the ground, and then behind those thorns are mushrooms, and then the zone turns from red to blue. It's just completely different zone. So it's like in my first alien-like vibe I was feeling. Of course, you know, you start at Hellfire, and you're in like space, it feels like. But this felt like almost a completely alien-like, the vibe. So you didn't feel this in any other zone, I feel like, in WoW till then. You start to see the social corruption in Outland, which I know that's lore, but in the quests that you're doing, like you see, dude, there's slaves everywhere. They're literally stealing the water. Water ain't free. So that was cool. Oh, dude, flying around as I was making my notes. Dude, Telrador, the Draenei city on a giant mushroom. You literally have to take an elevator up to a huge mushroom city. And it's the Draenei living up there. That city, one of the coolest cities in Outland for sure. Ooh, dude, the dungeons, they were fun. I do remember I forget exactly what they were called, but there was also a raid, Serpent Shrine Caverns. I haven't done the raid, but I do remember the dungeon. And then lastly, the Sporingers, the guys who live in the mushrooms. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
They have
I don't know how to describe them, but
they're like little alien beings living in mushrooms. They had sick reputation rewards. I don't know if you remember. I do. There was a shield that made attackers take damage. Use that on a prot pal with consecration, or all the things. And you reflected a bunch of damage. So I remember that from back in the day.
See, me being a cloth user, all I remember about the Zanger Marsh is that they had a moon pool that I had to go to make my moon cloth and stuff like that. That's pretty much all I remembered. Not all of it, but that's the reason I remember being there later, at least in terms of gear and whatnot. I mean, and I do think that the dungeons were good. It just kind of falls under a similar category that the Hellfire Peninsula dungeons fall under, where it just kind of feels samey. It feels very, like, each dungeon feels like it could have just been a fat dungeon, like they made in the original classic. And I don't necessarily fault them for not doing that, but just having a ton of them, like a one big dungeon, really, that it feels like being split up into smaller ones doesn't really.
Well, because they do this in multiple parts in TBC. They do it here. They do it, like we were just talking, in Netherstorm. In
Hellfire Citadel.
Yep, exactly. They do it in Auchindoun. And I think they do a really good job at showing the scale of these places while also showing the diverse different environments within them. But yeah, for those specifically in Zanger Marsh, it does feel a lot of the same.
And I do agree with you that I like having a dungeon area that feels like it has this massive scale to it. I just feel like, well, some other places do it better, and we'll talk about those more as we move down along this list here.
Giant mushroom city, Telrador for the win. That's the biggest takeaway.
Alrighty. Telrador number 1. At my number 3 spot, I had the Netherstorm. I don't know why I love the Netherstorm so much. It is a really cool vibe. The dungeons are really fun, though they do fall under a very similar vibe like I was talking about just before, where a lot of them feel very samey, but they do have enough of a difference, I feel like, from one dungeon to the next in terms of what you're actually fighting and facing, from like trees to whatever. I mostly remember the Botanica because of how many times I've run that place, but it did feel at least a bit more different in my opinion. But also the ethereals coming into the story and having them, you know, be kind of these wacky extraterrestrial bandage mummies that are just, I find them fascinating, and I think that the quests that you do for them are a little bit funny and a good bit fun. That also is in part to the goblins being in the story, where, I mean, we do get a bit more goblins come Wrath of the Lich King, but it's, to me as an Alliance player, it's nice to get some goblin tomfoolery going on before Cataclysm mostly takes that over to the Hordes. But yes, this is where I have the Netherstorm in terms of, and Tim mentioned the Ashes of Alar, and at first I was kind of unconfident about where I had placed this, but after you mentioned Ashes of Alar, I was like, no, you're right. This is where it belongs.
Exactly.
So I do enjoy the Nether. Oh, another thing, also when you're playing a mage in TBC, a lot of the mobs out there can be spell stolen, and you can do it like, there are like times where you can get like a buff that stacks like 20 times and have like 4,000% haste or something like that, and just being a mage out in Netherstorm is a fun time. And like Tim also mentioned, I even forgot about this place until he mentioned them too, those ecodomes, that's what they are. It was just a super interesting change of pace. Like, I feel like if the Teledar had a bit more of a unique, like, sprawling appearance, like some of the ecodomes kind of felt like they had, at least in terms of maybe verticality or something like that, I would have liked it a bit more. But I did really like the ecodomes as well, because, I mean, like, very similar to the other one. Kind of take an elevator up and has all these unique NPCs and whatnot that you'll be doing in there. So this is where I have the Netherstorm. And I think we're actually going to agree on one here as we move into the championship rounds. Second best zone in terms of gameplay for you, Tim. What do you got?
Oh, well, we're not going to agree because it's Hellfire Peninsula. Hellfire Peninsula is sick, bro. I don't know how. What did you rate it? Like the last one?
It's 7.
The worst one?
I think it's the worst.
Dude,
yeah.
You are crazy. So something that both TBC and that Wrath of Lich King does as well is it gives you a grand entrance. First impressions are very important, and going through that dark portal and seeing the atrocities on the other side, they do a splendid job at that. Dude, there's literally a pit lord in front of you. Dude, that's so sick. When I saw that crossing the portal, I was like, ooh. And it's a space, like you're in space, like it's a totally different vibe. So the grand entrance that they did, great job. Ground mounts. I think actually, me getting older, I am a big ground mount fan, not a big flying mount fan. I mean, even for the notes that I was doing, I turned on boomer flying, as I call it, but that is the standard, the old flying, right? And I wanted to see how I did these things back in the day, you know? So I was running on the ground in Hellfire, doing a boomer flying everywhere else, and the vibe with no flying is better, bro. Places matter, right? And so I remember seeing every single place in the Hellfire Peninsula back in the day because I was still on a ground mount. And the PvP was good because of that too, you know? A lot of these events, dude, in every one of these zones, almost everyone, there's a PvP event. I'll talk about them now in the next zone, but you don't talk about them for the other zones because nobody did them because everyone had flying, man. So, the dungeons, dude. Seeing the Fell Orcs in their corruption and Magtheridon's lair, dude, that was hard as hell. Like, really good dungeons, really good raid. And of course, dude, that Fell Reaver, the iconic Fell Reaver sound, the getting killed by a Fell Reaver for your first time. It's happened to everyone, man. That makes it pretty iconic too. And last thing, I remember the group quest that you have to go to this like demon area in the north, and you had to kill an Eridar, and he had demon bodyguards, and he was huge. And you got a really good trinket for either healing, DPS, or tanking.
This was like
yes.
max level stuff, wasn't it?
No, I'm pretty sure you got that at like 61, 62. Yeah.
But
So Hellfire Peninsula, immaculate vibes. Hellfire Peninsula.
Immaculate vibes. And I don't fault you if you did enjoy it. But for me, I just, again, and I also have to remind people, I only played this during the classic rendition of it. And I did play it pretty early on, too. So while I did end up doing most of the quests by myself and stuff like that, it was already just, I don't know. I didn't have the same aura that you had with this because I feel like everyone was trying to rush ahead and go as fast as they possibly could. So it just didn't hit the same with me. But my number 2, second best zone for gameplay in TBC is Nagrand. I love Nagrand. I think that this area is just, from doing the quest with like the Throne of Thunder and stuff like that to doing some of the, for me, again, as a mage player, one of my favorite things in the world is when they say, hey, I need you to go kill 100,000 mobs and you can kill them pretty much anywhere. And Nagrand is full of quests where they're just like, go out there and just kill everything. And I, as a mage, because all of these dudes were melee, I'm just pulling them with my wand and then frost noving and then blizzarding them down, having the time of my life, getting all of this kill XP as well as quest XP. It was, I specifically remember I hit the questing zone experience for that, and then I played all the way through the night while just non-stop leveling in Nagrand because of how much I enjoyed it when I did reach that portion of the TBC experience. And I also holds a special place in my heart because Tim and I, when we were both max level, him on his paladin, me on my mage, we'd go up to this little floating island in Nagrand and we'd duel. And it's the only time I've ever beaten Tim in PvP. It was so incredible. I ride that high to this day.
Wasn't I a paladin?
I don't think so. I think you were a ret.
I was okay. I was prot at that time, but okay, maybe I respect.
Doesn't matter. I'll beat his ass, and I'll forever take that. Also, I mean,
rematch.
Talk about just
Rematch.
to even just talk about the area of Nagrand, like the floating islands, and it being like this one preserved piece of Draenor that it feels like this last bastion of actual decency in all of Outland. I really like it, and the like cuts that we get from it from some of the later cinematics, high quality. Love seeing that place. Looks amazing. But that does move us into the number 1 best gameplay in all of TBC. Tim, what is it?
It's Nagrand, bro. You almost were right on that one. Nagrand is the number 1 best. I mean, that's my opinion, to be fair. But the overall vibe of Nagrand is unmatched compared to any other zone. You know, a lot of people say in Wrath of the Lich King, it's Grizzly Hills is the vibe of that expansion. Well, in my opinion, Nagrand is the vibe of TBC. You have your Nessingwary kill quest, which is cool. You get to see Nessingwary come through the portal, right? And those kill quests lead into very iconic elite kill quests that you do, including you doing those, but you also get a quest to kill Durn the Hungerer, the huge Grand that's circling that ethereal crystal. You know what I'm talking about? And that group quest was very memorable. What else? Oh, Ring of Blood, bro. Oh my gosh. What a great just rewards, experience, a good time to kick back with some pugs. Like, I remember Ring of Blood quests were going all the time, even in Wrath of the Lich King. Like, people were leveling up and everyone did Ring of Blood because it gave you a sick weapon.
Fighting for the chance to get that first.
Yeah. It will, and PvP's happening there because the Alliance want the tag, the Hordes got it, right? So Ring of Blood, great time. And then lastly, the Hala PvP event.
I actually have never done this event in my life, by the way.
Yeah, I was doing it. I remember, and you like literally fought to get control of the city. And I forget. I think when you control the city, you could then interact with like merchants and stuff. But in TBC Anniversary, I want to see revamped PvP events. I want it because, dude, a lot of the time people didn't do them, right? Because they felt it was just some BS. But come TBC Anniversary, that's one of the changes I want. All the PvP areas to them to revamp the event.
I'm here for it. At first, I was no changes. Now I'm kind of like, well, you can give me that experience again, but you know, I would at least like something to be slightly different, so I'm down for it. My number one gameplay zone in TBC is Terracar Forest because, and I'm really happy that you did mention the quest and chat recipe, because I feel like a lot of people think about Terracar Forest and they don't really think about that portion of it, but
Right.
It does have a lot of quests that you do there, even just in the Undercity, even, you know, that lead to some of the outlying areas like the Cenarian Thicket quest line with the mana bomb and stuff like that. And you have to go in there and you have to basically, you know, Mission Impossible, cut the fuse before another one goes off. I thought that was really cool. I thought that the Bone Waste quests were, again, really fun as a person who could usually pull a ton of the mobs and then AoE them down. But just having the Bone Waste as a location where it's literally like this line in the sand where everything has just died and is now like bones out there, and you had like elite quests where you'd go in and you'd slay some of these like massive beasts that are in some of the forests outside or even in the actual Bone Waste themselves. I liked it. I thought it was really good. And when I mentioned earlier that I thought that there were dungeons that did the dungeon hub better, this is what I'm talking about. Auchindoun. Auchindoun manages to have a very similar vibe in all of its dungeons, but all of the encounters that you face, for the most part, feel very unique. You know, in one, you're fighting all these ethereals and this Void Lord commander or lieutenant or whatever, or you're fighting some sound god, or you're fighting the Shadow Council, and every single one felt almost, not completely different, but felt different enough that it didn't feel like I was just kind of running an extension of the previous dungeon that I had just done. So I loved Terracar Forest. Tim, can you give me a quick rundown of your 7 to 1, and I'll give you mine back?
Oh yeah, going from worst to best. Yeah, mine goes Shadowmoon Valley, Blades Edge Mountains, Terracar Forest, Netherstorm, Zanger Marsh, Hellfire Peninsula, Nagrand.
Yep, and just to remind everybody, I have Hellfire Peninsula at the bottom, Zanger Marsh, Blades Edge Mountains, Shadowmoon Valley, Netherstorm, Nagrand, and Terracar Forest at the top. This went pretty much exactly as I thought it would. I felt like there would just be something different that called to you from your gameplay experience than was different to mine. And I'm really curious what other people might have for their personal, you know, most enjoyed lists that they might have for what they enjoy leveling through the Burning Crusade, because this was really interesting. And even just, I mean, the biggest one that sticks out is obviously that Hellfire Peninsula, right? Like, I feel like the rest of ours could have kind of interchanged for the most part. We both had Nagrand pretty close to the top, but Hellfire Peninsula at 2 for you and last place for me is interesting.
I love Hellfire, bro. It's also was known as a PvP spot even after many expansions. On toxic PvP servers, you would go in PvP in Hellfire Peninsula. So there's even significance after the TBC for gameplay wise that it has held as well.
I can see it. It's just not my experience. That place, boo, boo, boo. So with that, we're going to move into our lists about the lore of Outland before we head on into the Wrath talk. Once again, 1 through 7, worst to best. This time, shall I start us off, Tim?
Start us off. Now, to be fair, this lore significance is mainly you, right? I've learned what I've learned, but you know more than me. So and just like how you were excited to see what I had listed for the gameplay, I'm excited to see what you have listed for the lore.
Well, and also just because you've also recently mentioned to me, like, after learning about the lore, I ran this raid or I did this thing, and now it makes so much more sense and things feel so much more significant. I'm curious to see what, you know, maybe pops out to you a bit more. Even just today, you were flying around Blades Edge Mountain, and you're like, this place is sick. So I'm curious as well. The last place, the worst overall zone, in my opinion, for lore in the Burning Crusade is the Zanger Marsh. I kind of mentioned it. There is some stuff that we didn't really discuss that it feels kind of unfair to throw in here, but there is like the Farseer Nobuno storyline. He even has his book where it talks about how the Draenei come into being shamans and accept shamanism. And it's this whole bigger story. I think we're probably going to talk about it when we actually do Warlords of Draenor, or maybe we'll have another one of these little side episodes. But that is, like, I think one of the only real significant portions of lore that I feel like exist within the Zanger Marsh. And then obviously you do have Serpent Shrine Cavern, and you have Lady Vosh, who is a important character from Warcraft 3, which is always nice to see, but there's important Warcraft 3 characters in all of the zones, so I don't really think that it has anything over any of the next zones that are to come. Yeah, most of these quests are pretty lore insignificant, and there's not much going on here outside of, we know that this is where Velen went to hide after the whole slaughter of the Draenei by the orcs. But that is my number 7.
My number 7 is probably, you're going to probably be mad. Mine is Shadow Moon Valley. Just like how it is my last on it for questing. Now, to be fair, how I'm ranking these is lore significance based off of implications for further lore as well as previous lore. And other zones just have way more throughout it. All you have in Shadow Moon Valley is a Draenei Fallen Temple that Illidan took over, and literally it, man. Like, at least from my perspective as someone who plays the game, who doesn't really look into lore, but you don't get much lore going through doing the raid. You just see a little glimpse on how Illidan like lives his lives, and I see the, like, dude, he's got like elves dancing for him and shit, right?
As
but
we all
like
should.
Compared to the like other zones, like, dude, literally orcs coming from other zones and stuff like that, like, it just seems so lore insignificant for the future of the game as well. So that's why it's number 7 for me.
I don't fault you. There are a few things that I will definitely mention that have lore significance.
This is where demon hunters are created, though.
Yes.
So that being said, I didn't think of that
yes.
at the time. And that is cool, and that does have lasting implications. So I guess it should be higher than what I ranked, but I hate it.
Fair enough.
I hate it.
Yeah, no. I'm curious to see what you have in some of your next places. Moving on to the second worst lore experience in the Burning Crusade, I have at number 6, Nagrand. It's cool. The Throne of Elements is very important to the story. But outside of that, and oh, damn it, I forgot about, what's it called? The mountain. Mogushan.
Yeah.
Place is important too.
Yeah.
This one might have, oh dang, this probably should have been higher too.
Well, no, we'll talk. Keep going.
But yeah, I mean, outside of that, most of the stuff that you do is pretty macro scale. Like Tim said, you kind of have hunting quests, you kind of have arena quests where you're doing stuff, and none of it's too important for the grander scheme of the lore. You do also have the Thrall and Garrosh quests, as well as learning a bit about the Red Pox and how that all afflicted the orcs. But outside of that, there's not much that I would put that gives Nagrand a head over anything else. But the Throne of Elements is still one of my favorite areas, as we've seen by the gameplay. So that is my number 6. What do you got?
Actually, also Nagrand, which is crazy. We were both thinking it. And yeah, the only significant things are the Mag'har orcs, Garrosh Hellscream, the Throne of Elements, like you're talking about. And then I also put in my notes, also the Ethereals and Oshugan? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
But aside from the Ethereals and Mag'har orcs, maybe the Throne of Elements, that's really all you got going on. It's a beautiful zone. You got the Ring of Blood. You have all the things it ranked number 1 for me for gameplay, right? But for lore, yeah, it's the second worst for me.
I'm happy we can agree on one. Let's go.
Yeah, we did. Look at that.
Let's go. That takes us to the number 5 position for Outland in terms of lore, and that is, for me personally, Netherstorm.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, because it does have the option for lore into the future, but still the Ethereals to this day are very mysterious. We don't know a lot about them. We know a few things, and we can kind of speculate a lot of things, but nothing has for sure happened in the story yet. So the Ethereals, while they're fun to do their quests and stuff like that and see all their cool crazy tech and whatnot, it doesn't really have any greater implications at this time. But even like the lore for the Tempest Keep is kind of minimal outside of the Exodarch storyline and stuff like that. Like a lot of the stuff that you're doing in there feels kind of negligible in the grand scheme of it all until you actually reach Kael'thas and push the story any further along. You do also have that Void Lord storyline, which I do think, again, has great implications for the future, but at this time still has yet to really turn into anything. So, yep, that's why I put Netherstorm. What do you got?
Also, Netherstorm. Look at this. Wow, we are matching up right now. Well, a couple things. I love, and I touched on this, but you get to see how chaotic arcane energy or magic is. And you really, what's the counterpart to arcane? And it's fell. Like, so I like that this is the first zone that is like introducing that, and like you really get to feel that as a player and learn about that. Dude, after learning that Tempest Keep was a Naru ship, like the lore of going in there and seeing, dude, they have a hidden prison Void Lord that has escaped, like you were just saying, to learn about the Void Lords, and then now in our future expansions, we're probably gonna have to deal with the Void Lords. So I thought that had some impacts on the story, so that was pretty cool. You got to see like kind of Kael'thas's hunger for power and their experiments that they were doing inside Tempest Keep and everything. So I think lore-wise, it just really showed us into a lot of different aspects of the game that we weren't as knowledgeable about, and that's why I appreciate it a little more. At least for Netherstorm for number 5.
We're locked in. It's happening. With that, my number 4 best zone in terms of its lore implications is the Hellfire Peninsula. I mean, it can't be denied. There's the Dark Portal. There is the Path of Glory. There is the Hellfire Citadel that has, I believe, Kagath Bladefist inside, right? All of that is like very important stuff in terms of the lore. Like you can't even have like the beginning of the World of Warcraft timeline starts when the Dark Portal opens. In terms of lore implications, if it didn't have the Dark Portal here, I think it would be, like I already said, kind of forgettable. But because there's the Dark Portal, because you can stand in this area and see the destruction of Draenor literally all around you as you're in this area, it's really a magnificent zone in terms of its lore implications.
I agree with you a lot. I actually agree a lot more than you, though. So you'll see what I have to say later. But yeah, I'm a fan. My number 4, the Zanger Marsh. So I touched on it earlier, but this is where you start to actually see throughout quests the social corruption that that Outland is facing. Like I said, water ain't free. You literally see them sucking it out. All of the lore just points that out. And I mean, I guess this is kind of gameplay, but like, dude, swimming down the reservoir, seeing the slavery that was happening like pretty intensely. And that's something that I don't see a lot as much in World of Warcraft, is the showing the dark side of things. And I really felt that throughout the lore within Zangarmarsh.
I will say that Farseer Namundo story that I was talking about, where he teaches the Draenei, like before that he was a Vindicar, and the story of him like escaping the city that he was defending and whatnot is brutal. But
who was he held by?
Oh, orcs. Pretty intense story. Love it. It's pretty good. We definitely need to talk about it at some point. I can't believe I forgot to mention it back then. But yes, that makes sense to me. What exactly puts this zone ahead of some of the previous ones that you mentioned, at least in terms of lore significance? Like, what makes it better than Nagrand?
The feel of corruption and seeing it actually happening. Just the sounds of the reservoir, seeing them like literally sucking it out and knowing they're trying to control water, which is control life. You don't have, like, the quests are just kill quests. You're like literally shutting down these reservoirs, and you're learning why, right? And you don't really get that in Nagrand.
Fair enough. Makes sense to me. But with that, we move into our top 3, and in the number 3rd spot for me, in terms of lore, we have the Shadow Moon Valley. Tim kind of touched on it, and I did want to talk about it a bit more, but yes, I think what gives this zone more lore significance is the fact that this is where you see originally when you start as a demon hunter before you're set off to go to Mardoon to get the Sargerak Keystone, and then you see Maiev imprison all of the demon hunters, and as you know, like I did kind of mention before, there is the Terran Gorfiend quest, which for the people who played Warcraft 2, not me, you know, is pretty a pivotal character for a lot of the earlier portions prior to Warcraft 3 of the lore. So having that essentially the first Death Knight, cool. The Netherwing story, as we talked about, it gets expanded a bit more as well in the manga that they've released around that time as well. So I just like seeing a lot of the lore that goes on in that zone. Feels very cool, feels very interesting. And if it was just the Illidan stuff where you're sieging Black Temple, which is what I feel like is most memorable in a way, I would think it's like significantly worse, but because it does have a lot of the other elements that I've talked about, I do enjoy it. That's where I'm at. Oh, also to mention that the Black Temple originally was Karabor, the home of Prophet Velen before everything went down with the orcs and Draenei. So it does have even more lore significance to it. So I like it. I think it deserves to be in the number 3 spot. What do you got?
Blades Edge Mountains, number 3. And the reason being, bro, it's the birthplace of the Grand and the children, the ogres. Without the Grand, there would be no ogres. Without the ogres, there would be no orcs. And without orcs, Azeroth would be different. So I think Blades Edge Mountain actually plays a huge lore significance because if those things were never created, a lot of the wars or anything really wouldn't have happened in Azeroth, you know? Orcs play a huge role. Sibelian, this is where you first meet him. You get to see Sibelian later on in Dragonblight. So, you know, there's not many characters you meet in TBC that are still active in the story today. So that gets big points for me for lore significance. And then, dude, there was just cool stuff. So I was flying through it, and there's literally a mini dark portal to the Twisting Nether called Death's Door, and you see this huge demon, and I looked it up, and that's like one of the places that it's the portals for all these demons to come through to get to Outland. And it was ordered to get like shut down by Illidan, and he sent out demon hunters and stuff to do it. So just cool little stuff like that deserves to be higher up.
I absolutely agree. Number 2 spot for me, Blades Edge Mountains. And for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, and I love that we're doing this because again, you mentioned Sibelian. I forgot about Sibelian, but yes, he does come back into the story, and I love having that as an expansion on the Black Dragon storyline because for a long time it was really boring. So I thought that was super fascinating, and even besides that, just to have the whole storyline of the Grand versus the Black Dragons, having Gruul fight Deathwing, and Deathwing has some of his plates get ripped off by Khadgar in this Alliance expedition in the stories. Like, it's a very significant location, even just, and it's one that you can see when you play the game. Like we mentioned, it is kind of gameplay, but I think a zone that can tell you a story while you're actually in it is something that definitely needs to be mentioned. So you see all these dragons that are pinned up on these spikes and all these decapitated heads and smashed eggs, and you understand the story to a degree of what's going on, even without having to know anything. And I think that's awesome. Blades Edge Mountains is my second best lore experience in the Burning Crusade, making its way higher than it did on the gameplay.
The second best lore zone in the Burning Crusade, in my opinion, has to be Terakar Force. Dude, I've touched on it. Shattrath City is a city that felt great at one time that you can see has been slowly falling apart, whether it be to the lower city where there's, you know, people hungry. It just looks like the structures are demolished. Yeah, just not a lot of money is in those streets, and you can feel that. and then you take the elevators up to the high rises, to the scryers and the Aldor. Like there's it feels like there's a caste system almost. You do the quest where he takes you around and you see how bad the city has become. So I love learning about Shattrath City. I said it before. You don't get this vibe in modern WoW of seeing the bad. It's all just like Dragonflight felt like, oh, everyone's a friend, everyone's happy, everything's good. Yeah, but Shattrath City, there's like children starving, right? So not that that's cool, but I like seeing both sides, right? It shows the struggles of Outland. So love the lore in Shattrath. After, dude, doing this show and learning more about Auchendoom, dude, Murmur could have been fucking huge implications, right? Pandemonium, which is a commander of Dimensius, which we're probably going to fight Dimensius in Midnight. Like, those are huge lore implications right there that were barely even touched on, that not a lot of people know about, but actually have huge significance that could have been detriments to the world.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, we'll get to what I think about Terakar Forest, but you know, that as well as how Auchendoom ties in with the Arakoa, who only get like a really minor spotlight in this expansion, I think is really awesome as well. How that all ties into the Ravenlord Mount, which was another one of those experiences that I really remember when I was first getting into WoW. So I do agree. But with that, we come to the number one best lore experience, and Tim just said it for me. Yeah, Terakar Forest. I love Shattrath, and especially after doing this show and learning about how it was this former ogre capital that then got demolished by all these shaman that just rained thunder down for an entire night, as this entire city was then crushed into ash. And then the Draenei are like, hey, I guess we'll move into this perfect plot of land that everyone else thought was cursed because of just how terrified they were of the elements there. Awesome. Like I mentioned before, the Bone Waste, like being in the Bone Waste feels awesome because of you can feel the devastation of this entity of Murmur from within Auchendoom without even having to see him. And we didn't really get to touch on it. We probably not going to touch on it in this episode either, but a lot of the Arakoa storylines where they have like this curse of the shadow curse that they've been dealing with, and how that ties into the Ravenlord within the actual dungeon within Auchendoom. I think it's amazing. It's again one of those zones that tells a story, and it's a zone that also, by reading more about the zone itself from other sources, gives you a really cool feeling, just knowing specific things about, like, this is why Shattrath's probably in a hole, right? So that is where I'm at my number one in terms of lore for Outland. What do you got?
You're gonna hate it. It's Hellfire Peninsula, baby.
Oh my god.
Number one,
bro.
Once again. And how can it not be Hellfire Peninsula? Strap in. Well, first off, it has the Dark Portal. And without the Dark Portal, there's no the Burning Crusade, correct? So, huge Dark Portal. Pretty cool. It has 3 different dungeons that you get to see the Fell Orcs and their corruption, and I love all of them. I remember Heroic. Some of them were hard, man. But we're not talking about gameplay. We're talking about, I did like seeing the Fell Orcs in each different dungeon, and they felt unique. Dude, Magtheridon Lair, the Pit Lord. You got to see a Pit Lord. It's in Hellfire Peninsula. It shows the orcs, and you really get to learn about their corruption, and part of their corruption goes into my next part, the Path of Glory, dude. I was walking on that while I was writing down notes for this video, and it's literally in-game bones of, and they don't look like Draenei, but we know they're Draenei. Not many zones have that kind of lore and that the darkness that I've been talking about that TBC has. And the Path of Glory is it's a great little piece of lore, and you get to see it in game, right? Hellfire Peninsula has the Throne of Kil'jaeden. This is where the orcs drank the blood of Manaroth. This is where Doomlord Kha'Zix is, dude.
Kha'Zix's apparently the one that opened the portal for the TBC expansion, so he got lore too, so.
Exactly, and he's there, and that's literally where the orcs drank the blood and became green and crazed and became Fel Orcs, right? So huge lore.
You know, I did actually kind of forget that that is where they drank the blood at, and that does give it a lot more significance to me. I am happy. I think I maybe would put it over Shadowmoon Valley for that, now that I do think about it, but I'm still pretty happy with my list, I think. So, just to remind everybody, at the bottom of my list, in terms of the lore that we gained from the zone, Zangarmarsh is the worst. Moving into my 6th, I have Nagrand, and then Netherstorm, followed by Hellfire Peninsula, Shadowmoon Valley, Blade's Edge Mountain at number 2, and the best experience for lore is the Terracar Forest in TBC.
Mine from worst to best is worst being Shadowmoon Valley, which I might change just because of Demon Hunters. So yeah, it probably gets a couple points. Then being Nagrand as the second worst, Netherstorm, Zangarmarsh, Terracar Forest, and then number 1, Hellfire.
A little bit closer that time, but still some big changes. Again, I love to see it. I love to see what you remember that I don't, and what you find significant that I don't. So let's carry that on into Wrath, shall we? Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. As we do hop back over to what we prefer in the gameplay aspect of these next zones, what do you have for your worst gameplay experience in the Wrath of the Lich King?
Well, so there's 9 zones in Wrath of the Lich King. The worst one, so number 9 for me, Crystal Song Forest, bro. You don't even do anything there. Like
I was gonna actually ask, like, should we say this at the same time? It's outside of it having Dalaran on top of it, which I do love Dalaran, but the hub city doesn't earn like any points like that.
No,
especially because Dalaran's not really a city.
Well, hold up.
Well, it's not like one
saying Shatrath and Terracar.
Yeah, but the thing is that Dalaran, you don't really do lots of things in it. You get sent out of Dalaran to go do things, but in Shatrath, you do things in Shatrath.
There's a dungeon. There is a dungeon. And it is
fair
the
point.
prisoners.
And it's the fucking worst dungeon in It's the worst dungeon.
The Violet
in
Hold
Wrath.
is okay. It's cool because it's a randomized. There's multiple bosses and it can be randomized, and there's like, I don't know, 10, 15 bosses, but it only chooses like 4 to fight against. And I thought that was kind of cool. Kind of sucked going for a piece of gear though.
Or the achievement like me, and I had to wait like literally 9 weeks, keep getting the wrong fucking thing.
Yeah. So, but gameplay wise, that's really the only thing you did. But yeah,
there's the PvP in the Undercity.
Yeah, I didn't really even do that.
I didn't like it, and I did the Legion one way more.
So yeah, Crystal Song Forest just kind of sucks, bro.
Yep, and I'm right there with you. Crystal Song Forest is the worst gameplay experience in Wrath. It is pretty forgettable. Even when we were originally doing like the preparation to talk about the Crystal Song Forest, Tim's like, do we even have quests there? And I'm like, yeah, remember there's like Ghost Highborn, and that's like because those are like literally one of 5 quests that you actually do within the zone. It's cool in terms of its aesthetic, but it almost feels incomplete to me.
Yeah, I agree. And it might be incomplete, who knows?
But that does take us down now to the number 8 spot. What do you have for that?
Sholazar Basin. Like, you had to pick against 2 factions, the Frenzy Heart or the Oracles, and the only reason you chose one was for a green Proto Drake, but all the quests felt generic. It was just overgrown life, and you helped either the Frenzy Heart or the Oracles, and that's pretty much it. It was pretty uninteresting in my opinion.
I'm not too inclined to disagree. I did like the Titan storyline that you end up doing as you play that experience. I felt like I kind of mentioned at that episode as well, it was one of those actual vehicle quests where I did feel like a badass while doing it. But yeah, I am inclined to say that it is not the best in terms of actual gameplay. My number 8 is Dragonblight. And
you're crazy.
I think Dragonblight is not a very fun zone to level through. just because they constantly have you running from one end to the other to do one quest to go turn it in all the way back there and then go back, and half the time it's in a tunnel that you have to run like 6 miles to get to the quest objective, and then you got to run out and do it again, and I don't think it's all that great. I think that the lore implications are cool, but we're not talking about lore. So outside of that, when we're talking about the actual gameplay, the Tuskar questline is not very fun. When we're talking about gameplay, the, what are they called? The Tonka questline isn't really that fun. There are some cool questlines that you do while doing the Worm Rest Accord stuff, but outside of that, it's not my favorite, not very memorable. I will say that the Azul Narub dungeons are definitely my favorite portion of Dragonblight, but the actual questing experience while out in there, and even then, like, because I don't really like Old Kingdom. I think Old Kingdom is kind of slow and not very interesting, and I do like Upper City more, but outside of that, yeah, not much saves Dragonblight in my opinion.
Putting the zone that had the Wrathgate cinematic as second worst is crazy. That's crazy. Wrathgate cinematic alone gives it multiple points.
And it was cool. And even like the whole fetching the shield quest was cool, but I think that there's another zone that gives me more intrigue into everything that leads to the Wrathgate. But what did you have at number 7?
A boring tundra. So I talk about a grand entrance for TBC, going through the Dark Portal. That was cool. I'll talk about Howling Fjord later, because you can start in Howling Fjord or Boring Tundra. But Boring Tundra did not feel cool coming into. And this is your intro to the game, right? So didn't love that. The only memorable quest, and which is part of the gameplay for me, was fighting through the temple city of Ankilla. And then you get ported to the Naxanar. And, you kill everyone on the Naxanar, and then you see the Lich King, and that's like your first introduction to him. And I'm pretty sure you got like a blue weapon. And so that was cool, especially getting the blue weapon if you didn't have a good weapon. That was good. And then gameplay-wise, in Boring Tundra, you got Eye of Eternity, unique raid, vehicle mechanics were interesting at the time, but going back and playing it in Classic, it's terrible. It's not fun, but interesting at the time. I get what they were going. That is why that's really my most memorable gameplay moments that I had.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Borean Tundra, number 7. I do think that the Caldera quest lines and going through the Nexus and doing a lot of the stuff over there is interesting. But everything before that, while you're in the Warsong Hold, I believe it's called, and you're just fighting these Nerubians, and you have to go collect these eggs, and it's this like vertical terrain that you don't have a flying mount yet to get to, and it's just like, it's not very fun. And then you're going out, and I will say, it is one of those zones that you can pull a lot of like wildlife and do quests like that as a mage, but it does not manage to save it the way that some of the zones in TBC were able to, especially because just some of these other zones that we're going to talk about, I think, have a story that is more fun to play. And I'm trying to remember, even like there were like there were like bones and stuff out in the Borean Tundra. There were like tar pits or something like that, and it was just forgettable.
Yeah, I agree. Very forgettable. Not a great first impression you want to have for the expansion. Now, given you can go to 2 different zones, and I bet we both listed the other one I'm talking about a lot higher.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Yep.
Number 6 was Zoldrak, man. The most memorable moments gameplay-wise on Zoldrak is when you infiltrate the trolls, you win the favor of the Lich King, you steal that power and shit, but like that quest line I remember, dude, there's this huge guy named Thrim the Hope Ender, and I looked into him while I was taking down these notes, and apparently he's like this atrocity created from the corpse of a storm giant by the Sand Lane. And I remember seeing this giant motherfucker running around, and the first time I saw him, it was like a Fell Reaver moment, like, oh shit, so that was cool gameplay wise. Like, there's not many zones where I remember like moments like that. I remember that in Zoldrak, so get some points from me. And Gundrak and Drektharen Keep, that's the dungeons, had decent mechanics, but overall, dude, just like most troll things, they're forgettable. So, yeah.
Well, and I think also just having come out of doing TBC where you did the Zulaman and did the Amani troll stuff, and just prior to that you were doing ZG and Classic, I think that the troll
it's never
archetype
ending.
the trolls were a bit well done at that point, especially because, I mean, the storyline is cool, but outside, if we were just talking about the actual gameplay itself, it didn't really feel very enticing. This is actually the spot that I ended up putting the Sholazar base in. I have kind of mentioned I like the idea of going back to some other zone to bring back a weapon, and you're riding along in just like crushing all these dudes, and you're flying up to the top of these massive pillars and channeling the energy of Freya into them to smite down a bunch of the Cult of the Damned while doing that sort of stuff. It felt grand, it felt epic, it felt like where you were really starting to get into some of the more grandiose portions of Wrath of the Lich King, where some of the previous stuff felt a bit more kind of grounded. So I really enjoyed the quest here. I did like the uniqueness of choosing between one of two factions and then kind of doing their quest line to go to war and having the option to at least swap back, which I did dig that. And like Tim and I have mentioned, the green proto drake. So this is where Sholazar Basin confidently ranks for me. But with that, we move down to number 5 for Wrath of the Lich King. What do you got, Tim?
Oh, Dragonblight, bro. Of course, I said it. Wrathgate cinematic, and that could be lore, but that's part of the gameplay, right? I was doing a quest, right? I was playing the game, and boom, all of a sudden, Wrathgate cinematic pops up, and I realized I need to upgrade my computer because my computer can't play that. But it was cool. It was the first time, something like that happened, and then I, started looking into like computers and how they work, right? So that was cool. The Nerubian dungeons, bro, that was some cool gameplay. I liked seeing a glimpse into the king and doing that through a dungeon. I thought that was 2 dungeons. I thought that was actually really cool, and it made me crave a little bit more about the knowledge. And now that we have Azj-Kahet, I don't care. It is boring, bland, generic, the same thing over and over, just for like architect structure. It just bores me. But at the time, I craved more. I wanted to learn more about this civilization because of the gameplay, because it teased me, right? So I enjoyed that. The Wormrest raids had decent mechanics, but again, kind of like Gundrak and Drektharen, they're kind of just forgettable, right? You don't do those in Time Walking. No, you do Ulduar, right? Yeah. So like, fun at the time. It was cool. One of them, I remember you pulled like all the bosses and you did them all in the middle of the room, and you did that and you got a special dragon, and I won one of those dragons when it was current, and I remember that, and that was fun, but like nobody cares about those raids now. Right?
Yeah.
So the Dragonblight, number 5.
Well, and I guess I will also say, to throw this in here, Naxxramas exists, but is basically a carbon copy of a raid that we already got.
Oh,
so
yeah, but sorry, I actually have that in my notes. Nax was cool at the time to bring it back, because this was my first iteration of Nax, and I remember it doing it, and I remember it being hard at the time. I was in 8th grade trying to do Naxxramas, clicking hunter abilities, not knowing rotations or anything, right? Like, I have fond memories of that, but now where I'm gonna play Classic and I'm gonna do Nax and Classic, and then when Wrath comes out, I'm doing Nax again. It's kind of a pain in the butt now,
Yep, I agree. Good for Classic, maybe, and good if you didn't get the experience, but in the grand scheme of like all the gameplay that we've had for both TBC or Classic leading into Wrath of the Lich King, a bit forgettable. At my number 5 spot, this is where I did put Zuldrak as well, for a very similar reason. I did really like actually doing the quests and getting to see these wild gods in person, essentially for the first time, really. We've seen Hakar, we've seen stuff like that, but it's not really something that we've got to experience in the gameplay. So getting to see that, getting to see the Zandalari trolls, and having them basically tell you, yeah, we're just here to write down some notes about killing these guys killing themselves, being in the middle of this war between two sides where you're basically like, I don't want either of you guys to win. You guys both suck. I thought was a cool concept. And like you did also mention that I even kind of forgot about, like the Scourge portion of that that zone where they have like these massive colossi they're walking around. I'm pretty sure you end up mind controlling one, and then you do another one of those vehicle missions that makes you feel just monsterly as you stomp across everything.
Yeah, some of the vehicle missions were good, some were terrible.
Yeah, and I do try and appreciate them for their time at least, but yeah, a lot of them weren't the greatest. But that is why I have Zul'Drak at number 5. What did you have in your number 4 spot, Tim?
So this is where it starts getting a little bit harder. I put Grizzly Hills. A lot of people hype up Grizzly Hills. I think Grizzly Hills is just okay. Like, people like it for the music. I get that, and it's cozy. The vibe is cozy. But flying through it, I just had more memorable places elsewhere. One thing I did like, I played Horde in Classic. I remember the Ring of Blood style quest at the Conquest Pit. I thought that was really cool in Grizzly Hills. I liked questing through the Fallen World Tree. That was cool, though I didn't know what the hell it was at the time. You get your first hint, really, I feel like, at Titan Influence in Grizzly Hills at Thor Modan. Where you're like, oh shit, there's some Titan Influence on Northrend. And I remember seeing those rune, dwarf rune guys. You know what I'm talking about? What are their names?
I think they're literally called rune dwarfs, or like stone dwarfs.
Yeah. I remember seeing those and being like, what the heck is that? And then Blood Moon Isle, dude. I remember, dude, you brought back that memory. I completely forgot about it until we were talking about Grizzly in our episodes a couple back. And I actually remember going to Blood Moon Isle with a group, getting to the top of that structure, killing the Shade Arugal. It was a good time, but other zones, I just feel like there were more memorable gameplay moments. Grizzly Hills, great music, cool vibe.
I actually struggled at this exact spot with this very same problem, but I did end up putting Grizzly Hills a bit higher on my list. At number 4, I have the Howling Fjord. I think it's a really fun zone. I think it's just packed with quests to just give you, like, choose whatever direction you want to go and face Vrykul, or go into this mine and hear the whispers of the old gods, or do some sort of quest if you're on the Horde side to go and try and perfect this plague that Sylvanas has been working on, where you have like this. It's just overall a significantly more engaging and, for the Wrath of the Lich King experience, more impactful to me while I'm leveling through the Howling Fjord as opposed to the Borean Tundra. Like you said, it's about making an entrance, and when you go into Howling Fjord, it's not just like this flat plateau like the Borean Tundra is. Like the Borean Tundra, sure, it has the Nexus in the background, but you go here and there's this massive structure of Utgard Keep in front of you, and it's like all sorts of different terrains and directions that you can go. You're taking elevators, and there's all this Vrykul architecture and whatnot. It's, I think, one of the best questing experiences in Wrath of the Lich King, for sure.
Yeah, I love Howling Fjord, and to go and just get it rolling, that's actually my number 3. So we're very close, is Howling Fjord. Dude, you touched on it for the grand entrance. If you haven't done the boat ride as Alliance to Howling Fjord, please do so. I did it for getting immersed for writing my notes. Turn your UI off, go to the front of the ship, stand on it, and see exactly what we're talking about. You zone in, you go in between these mountains. There's a burning ship hanging in the mountains, which, like, I don't know how the hell it got there, but there is. And then you come through this pass and you see Utgard Pinnacle littered with skulls in the architecture, and it sets the vibe of the expansion so well. This is probably the best grand entrance out of any of the expansions, at least for what I think. So that alone, oh my gosh, it sets the tone for the expansion. It's a beautiful zone, but it also shows Northrend was once thriving of life and is capable of life. You see waterfalls and nature and just Vrykul not corrupted by undeath yet throughout, and it's so luscious and green. A beautiful zone, like you said, the elevators you're taking, it's just so grandiose. Utgard Keep and Pinnacle were cool beginner dungeons to do because it showed the Vrykul falling into necromancy and the Lich King, and he has this grasp on them. It's also where you get the blue proto drake. So it also gets points for mount points. You do get a mount in this zone as well. Honestly, I think that's it. It's the best zone to start in. Don't go to Borean Tundra. Go to Howling Fjord.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And just to move into my number 3 spot, I have the Grizzly Hills. So, I mean, for a lot of the reasons that you said, that it was a really good zone, like being able to go inside of this massive world tree after I had played Warcraft 3. And I also really didn't know the significance of the world tree at the time, but being able to be inside of it and looking up and having all these like furbog homes that are like spiraling surrounding you, it was a really cool experience to be inside. This is where we first encounter, well, we kind of get more implications that the Worgen could be a bigger threat in the future and stuff like that. So getting to see them spreaded all the way out to here and bringing back the Shade of Arugal and having that quest line that ties back into Classic was really cool. And yeah, I really enjoyed the Grizzly Hills. I think it's like to me it's like the Howling Fjord, right, really sets the stage for everything, and then you move into the Grizzly Hills and it's a very similar vibe. It is a bit more chill, like you mentioned, but it really does continue to build off of the Howling Fjord's experience as you move into this next zone, and I think it's really great. And I also like that the storylines in it do also end up kind of, I mean, a lot of stories in the games breadcrumb into other zones, but I feel like this one has like a more full storyline with Drakuru and the whole troll mojo that leads into Zuldrak and stuff like that, a lot better than some of the other zones that we've gotten previously. But that is why I have Grizzly Hills at number 3. Top 2, Tim. This is where I'm really curious of what you got here.
I mean, we haven't said the 2 zones that are left, so it seems like we're in semi-agreement, but number 2, it could be number 1. I put it number 2, though. Storm Peaks. Storm Peaks had amazing quest lines. We talked on it a couple episodes ago where you're working with Thorm, fighting against Loken. You get to see the ice giants who are the sons of Hodir. So huge Titan influence that you never really saw too much until this point. And it got my mind curious about like, what are Titans? And I know we're not talking about lore, but the gameplay made this happen for me. Like, all of Storm Peaks is littered with Titan architecture. It is like a Titan facility, right? Like Ulduar's there, right? You really saw the scale of the Titans and their structures. You felt small. I loved that. It really made you feel like an ant, and the Titans were giants, right? I remember doing the dailies with the giants to get my shoulder enchants. Yeah. Also, you got the mammoth mounts from them, which, dude, the mammoth mounts back in the day, like, that was the flex. Mounts weren't that big. So I remember seeing a Tauren on the mammoth mount, and he was so big he was blocking the mailbox intentionally. I knew what he was doing. But it was just funny seeing how big these mounts were getting. This was the first time in WoW where mounts were getting that big. So everyone wanted a mammoth, whether you got it from Wintergrasp or from these guys in Storm. And then also, I touched on it, Ulduar, right? It is one of the most all-time favorited raids, right? People love Ulduar, or loved. I will say, in Classic, I know a lot of people weren't a fan because of its difficulty, but it's generally looked back on as a great raid, one of the all-time favorites.
Yep.
Of course, you got Mimron's Head, so you get mount points from that, and you also get bonus points for Time Lost Proto Drake, man. Yeah, I remember, getting it. I don't want to rub it in Rob's face too much. I know he wished I told him to get on, but I did at one point find Time Lost Proto Drake, and that does bring back some gameplay memory.
And I'm right there with you. Storm Peaks is the second best gameplay experience in World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King. It is the first zone where flying really feels like epic, and it feels like you're going from like one mountain peak to another. Like, you had some of it in like Netherstorm where you needed to get up to Tempest Keep, and you had some of it where you were in like some of these other zones, kind of like I mentioned with the Blade's Edge Mountains. But this is the first time that like flying felt awesome, and you're just flying through all of these very cool lands, and you're doing polar bear quests while disguised and helping goblins as alliance, and you have the Hall of Thunder, you have the Hall of Origination, I think it is, the other one that you do for Bran. I'm not a huge fan of that one, but you have a lot of options for Ulduar to make it feel like this labyrinth of Titan tech before you even get into Ulduar and you're doing it. Ulduar, great raid. This is the first time I feel like you really get that option to do hard mode stuff, and I'm a big fan of having at least that sort of option to spice up the gameplay a bit. So having that was really cool. Getting to see all these Titan Keepers, and obviously the actual fight with Yogg-Saron itself, while you have to jump in and out of his brain and do your best to not lose your mind. Amazing experience. And yeah, I think that we've covered most of the things. You talked about a lot of the things that I was thinking too.
I remember getting my first purple ever, the axe in the Halls of Lightning, the two-handed axe on my paladin, I think is what it was. And me jumping up and down, running into my parents' room and telling them. I do remember that as well.
Yeah. I can't beat those moments. But, I mean, that leaves us with just one zone for leveling that we both have agreed on for the end here of... You want to go ahead and say it, Tim? What is the best questing zone in Wrath of the Lich King?
Ice Cream Citadel. Ice Crown.
Yeah.
Ice Crown. I mean, dude, you got to see the scale of the Scourge, dude. We talked about breaking into Ice Crown in that Argent camp in the southeast. I forget what it's called. But I remember breaking through and just seeing the atrocities that they're doing. And you really felt like we were pushing the final assault against the Lich King. And it was all or nothing. It's hard to recreate that kind of vibe anymore. They did it so well back in the day. I remember, dude, some of the areas were changed. Do you remember clearing out the Shadow Vault? It was a bunch of Scourge up in the northern part, and you were slowly pushing them back, and then you eventually beat them back, and then you got the Knights of the Ebon Blade to set up a camp there. And this was the first time phasing became a thing. And the zone would actually change, and you would only see people who have done the phase that you're in. Yeah. So it was kind of controversial, but love it or hate it, there were flying hubs. Remember those flying Horde and Alliance hubs? Dude, I remember my laptop was so shitty. At my view distance, I couldn't see very far. And you hit the map, and the map wouldn't tell you where it is. And you just had to kind of just fly around, and yeah, you just had to fly around and get lucky to find this fucking thing in 15 frames per second. I was probably playing. So it was cool, but annoying. What else about Ice Crown? Ooh, the Arthas Heart. We just talked about that. That was a cool quest, finding his heart, destroying it. And then the other iconic quest was, dude, we talked about it as well, saving that night and going all over. I remember going to Outland. That was the most memorable time, going to literally a Naru, a being of light, and finding out even a being of light can't cure the undeath. And lastly, the Argent Crusade, man. You say you hate it, but back in the day, everyone was doing that, John. I remember jousting random people, dueling at the grounds, just talking to people. You got decent purples, I remember, if you turned in enough badges. I actually have some of those weapons still in my bank. Just because I remember, I wasn't that good at the time, but I was getting purples,
I mean, and I, for the most part, agree with you. I think that everything that you said is true about pushing your way into this land that just feels overwhelmed at all times by undead, and you're just having to fight for every single foot forward that you're making into here before you're setting up base after base, for the Argent Crusade, for the Knights of the Ebon Blade, before you have this grand tournament, which, in terms of a concept, I thought was really cool. And playing it one time is fun. It's just not something that's enjoyable to run multiple times, at least in terms of the dungeon and raid. I do like the concept of having all of your factions together and earning favor with every single one of your factions.
Yeah, and I think you had to get exalted with your faction. or other factions to even represent them. Like if you're a troll and you want to represent Orgrimmar, I think you had to get exalted with Orgrimmar.
Yep. And even that zone, despite me not being the biggest fan of doing the quests, like they would have you go on to quests that were in like the sea to the north and go to that Cavaldir island, and you do these quests that were exclusive to doing the Argent tournament. So that felt really cool to do as well. And I mean, just the everything that leads into obviously Icecrown Citadel, the Halls of Reflection, where you're seeing these characters like Sylvanas and you're seeing Jaina like look upon Frostmourne basically since the last time that they saw Arthas. But just like all of the intensity that you felt. I mean, I mentioned it when we were talking about the Fall of the Lich King, but he just feels so Vader-like as you're trying everything that you can to fight against him, and he seems to just nonchalantly brush it off and run you down and nearly whoop your ass every time. Really cool. I really enjoyed everything that Icecrown has to offer. And it is one of those zones that does have like the Horde versus Alliance, but for everything that has happened after the Wrathgate, I feel like you feel again the implications of the lore just by playing the game. So yeah, unquestionably in my opinion, gameplay, the best zone in Wrath of the Lich King is Icecrown, and Tim agrees. Going from worst to best in terms of gameplay, I have Crystal Song Forest, Dragonblight, Borean Tundra, Sholazar Basin, Zul'Drak, Howling Fjord, Grizzly Hills, Storm Peaks, and Icecrown at number 1.
Going from worst to best, starting at number 9, we got Crystal Song Forest, Sholazar Basin, Borean Tundra, Zul'Drak, Dragonblight, Grizzly Hills, Howling Fjord, Storm Peaks, and the best being Icecrown. For gameplay.
Yes, sir. Into the lore segment for Wrath of the Lich King. I'm going to kick us off with what I believe is the worst zone for lore in Wrath. And once again, the championing of the worst is Crystal Song Forest. Cool zone again, aesthetically really cool. But outside of the lore of the Highborn fighting against the dragons there's not... And having Fandral have planted one of the great trees there that turns into like this spectral thing, there's like literally nothing going on in Crystal Song Forest. Even the Dalaran lore is pretty lackluster. A lot of the monsters that you end up fighting in the Violet Hold are really insignificant in the grand scheme of everything. The Mage manga that covers a lot of events in Dalaran is really not good. But you said you also have Crystal Song at number 9?
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, it's terrible. We did the same thing for gameplay. It's just, it feels unfinished. There's one thing that happened, and there's no quest there to back anything up. It's just, it's the worst.
Yep. And I entirely agree. So with that, we'll just move on from Crystal Song Forest into my number 8 pick, which I think is Zul'Drak. The lore, like I mentioned, kinda of the Zandalari being there to witness the downfall of the Drakari, and the whole Drakari history of them being there following the war with the Akir is cool. But outside of that, like, nothing really happens in Zul'Drak that will continue on afterwards. Like, I believe even in some of the story, like the Exploring Northrend book that they have, they say that the Scourge are still just there. So it's like nothing has really happened in Zul'Drak, and considering not much led up into it, I just don't see it having very strong lore implications.
I'm actually right there with you, bro. Zul'Drak as well. Like, you get the lore about them, like, enslaving their Loa, but that's about it. And trolls, we said it earlier, are kind of just overdone at this point, bro. Like, I've done so many Zols this and Zols that. Like, I'm trolled out, dude. And they're not that much cooler in the northern ways.
Yep. So moving into the number 7 spot, I have the Sholazar Basin. While I did mention that I thought the gameplay was a lot of fun, outside of the Titan storyline, pretty much everything that happens there is insignificant. There's some Hemming Nesting Way storyline, but outside of that, you are really just doing this Titan quest where you're going to go get the Adamidian, which is apparently this super famed weapon, and you're going to bring it back. And Sholazar Basin in general is just like this playground for the Titans, but outside of that, it's not doing much.
My number 7 is Howling Fjord, and to be fair, it's pretty much just the Vrykul, and I guess the Vrykul do turn into humans, so I guess there's lasting effects. But aside from Vrykul being Vrykul, that's all that's happening in the Howling Fjord. And I felt like there's just not that much for lore going, you know? I guess, maybe. And them like killing their children. I do remember that story. But for lore just within Wrath of the Lich King, like when I'm playing through it, I really didn't feel like there was that much lore I was learning.
Interesting. I definitely put mine a bit higher for a reason that I'm going to bring up then, but I'm curious to see if you have the same mindset as I discussed that. Moving on to number 6 for me, I have the Grizzly Hills. The lore is good, and like I said, I like the way that it transitions from the Howling Fjord questlines into the Grizzly Hills and the story that continues on after that into the Zuldrak area. But besides that, the Ursoc questline was really fun, and that lore feel is cool. I like that. Like I mentioned before, I like seeing these wild gods and these Loas basically for the first time, really getting to interact with them. And we mentioned getting to see the significance of Vordrasil in the lore and how it ends up having its roots reach Yogg-Saron to create the Emerald Dream is really very... As I think about it now, it is super impactful on the story down the line, but it's almost like the very end of it just kind of whispers about some of that stuff. The story that you get in the game while you're questing through the zones and whatnot, you don't really learn a lot about that. But because of the books, I think, and the stuff that we've learned about Yogg-Saron going forward, I think is what bumps it up to the spot that I have it now. Because outside of it being a really cozy zone and a fun questing experience, I don't think much goes on in terms of the lore that really feels super impactful, at least for the current setting of Wrath of the Lich King.
I actually have number 6 as Grizzly Hills as well. Honestly, dude, we have the same points. I mean, you got some Worgen lore, which I guess is cool, right? Fuck up Fandral probably gives him minus points, honestly. Ursoc is cool, but I'm not a druid guy, man. I really could care less about druid lore. So Grizzly Hills lore-wise, just kind of middle of the pack, you know?
Yep. That's really how I was feeling as well. And that is where we come to the number 5 spot in terms of lore for me. I have the Howling Fjord here. The reason I ended up putting this one higher than you did is specifically because of the lore implications of the questline where you're working on the plague and you're trying to like transport it to Venom Spite and stuff like that, and you have like this lore about it like literally melting people and all of that leads into the Wrathgate, and how that feels like it really connects you to Dragonblight the same way that I was kind of talking about with the other zones connecting you to the next zone that you'll be ending up in. So having that quest line for the Hand of Vengeance and Sylvanas was something that really bumped it up in terms of like how interested I am. It is also the things that you mentioned where it's like the Vrykul and King Yimron and Skadi the Ruthless and those stories that come from their war all against the fire giants and whatnot. But outside of that, I think that quest line with the Blight is what really draws my attention and really gives me like, I feel like if I was questing through it for the first time and I was reading about this, I'd be like, oh, what are we going to do with this? Like, what's about to happen? So that's why I personally ended up putting it as high as I have it. What do you got?
Number 5, Borean Tundra. Borean Tundra really doesn't got much going on. I mean, you got Malygos and the Blue Dragons. Sure, in Caldera. But other than the Nexus and the Blue Dragons, there's not really shit going on in the Borean Tundra. So, yes, Malygos Blue Dragons do have a huge lore significance, but they're just in this little corner in all of Borean Tundra. It's a small percentage of the area. Because of that, there's just not really much going on in the Borean Tundra. So it gets number 5 for me, man.
Fair enough. I actually have it right here at number 4 for me. And for a very similar reason, though I think it's just because I hold the Nexus Wars and stuff like that at a significantly higher value to the lore. Just because it is like the next time after Deathwing falls that we get another encounter where the dragons have to basically deal with something that's bigger than themselves. And having the Nexus War and having the storylines from the Netherwings that we talked about, how that leads into it and he consumes them for magic and stuff like that. Having those from the mangas really does also give it a lot more life to him, like really losing his mind. And also the just being able to see this location, to be able to actually see this massive Nexus structure feels awesome, and it does really give this air of like these magical entities that have so much more control and understanding of magic than most mortals do, to be able to once again see that in Borean Tundra. But yeah, like you mentioned, everything outside of that really kind of forgettable. The Alliance starting area, forgettable. Or the Horde starting area, forgettable.
And someone who hasn't read any books, like it seems so less significant for me. Yeah.
And I will say there is like that Sourfang questline. I feel like this is one of the first times where you really see Sourfang just like ripping through hordes of undead and stuff like that with his axe. But what did you have for your number 4 spot?
Sholazar Basin. I thought it was cool learning about, how unstable life can be without order. And this is like we saw it in Draenor too, I think. Yeah, just how if you let life go untamed, it can grow out of control and into chaos almost. So I liked seeing that, and I like seeing like without the Titan order, like it could be something completely different. I like seeing the connection to Ungoro Crater with just how different places of Azeroth are connected with each other. Learning the lore about the Titans and Freya. Other than that, I mean, I think because of its Titan connection, it ranks higher on my list, because especially showing life magic as well.
I agree. I think that, and I also think that it really, being able to go from this zone, which I do believe is what you will level just before you move into the Storm Peaks, really does kind of give you the more grandiose lore of, like the cosmic scale that you're going to be dealing with as you move into some of these later zones that you'll end up doing. So I do like that lore implication that you get as you're kind of moving out of what I would, again, consider to be more of the grounded kind of Northrend and move into more of a cosmic scale battle that you'll come to realize. At number 3, top 3 for me, I have Dragonblight. Dragonblight for the lore, super significant. Like, this place where dragons go to die. This is the place where Galakron fell, and you can see his skeleton still there. And you have the Wormrest temple where the dragons have met for millennia to discuss things. You have just... It is just cram-packed, and you have the Wrathgate experience and the lore implications that lead so far on into the future because of that. You have the tie-in with Warcraft 3 from the Nerubians with Ajkahet and everything like that, or Ajol Nerub. But yeah, just overall everything that goes on in this zone, from the Emerald Dragon Shrine to the Ruby Dragon Shrine to everything, has lore that leads further into other zones or even just other expansions. So that is why I placed it where I have placed it. I think that it is one of the most significant portions in terms of lore to World of Warcraft and Wrath of the Lich King.
I'm right there with you. Number 3, Dragonblight, big dog. You know what? They say Naxxramas is still there and stuff is still happening there, which I think is pretty cool. There's no one controlling the Scourge, but the Scourge can still be dominated. So the potential lore that can come, and we're going back to Northrend. May I remind you, we have not seen the last of Naxxramas, and I'm excited to see more about Naxxramas, but Naxxramas is still in Dragonblight, so it gets huge points for that. Like you said, dragon lore with Wormrest Temple. You got all the orders, their head guys there, at least at the time. You have Galakron's the rest, dude, that big-ass badass dragon and all the havoc that he caused, so that's major lore points. It's just dead remnants are there. You got the drama from the Wrathgate. Dude, nobody trusted anyone because of the Wrathgate. The orcs, the undead, the humans. Nobody trusted anyone. So there was huge drama because of the Wrathgate. So, boom, even more lore points. The Nerubian Empire, as you said, if Warcraft 3, yes, you got to see their empire. So huge lore that you saw as well with those 2 dungeons.
I mean, even
Bro,
down
you got
there
the Scarlet Crusade.
Even down there in the Old Kingdom, just to touch on that real quick, you have the Faceless, which, I mean, we know are going to become significantly bigger of an enemy as we move further down, and they're just kind of hinted at this time for that portion of the the thing, but you're saying the Scarlet Crusade.
Oh, you got the Scarlet Crusade there as well. New Hearthglen. You get to see the fanatics that are probably a little more fanatical making their way to Northrend. Bro, what about the Forgotten Shore? Tell me a little bit about this. I think you know. Is this where Arthas like killed his soldiers, and that's why there's ghosts there at the Forgotten Shore?
Well, this is where he betrays the mercenaries that are working under him and has his soldiers kill them and burn the ships. But yeah.
And you literally see the ghosts there. And this is like the start of Arthas's corruption in Northrend. So yeah, pretty big lore tidbits throughout.
I mean, seeing the fractured ground and the effects of Malygos channeling so much arcane power into the Nexus, where all of these like arcane lifeblood lines are just like leaking through the zone as you walk over it into these like surge needles. Again, the lore, great. Love Dragonblight in terms of the lore. Which again, hilarious considering it was my second worst in terms of playing.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yep, but with that, we are moving into the top two, and I'm once again really curious to see, as we only have two to decide with, and I placed Icecrown as number 2 for lore significance.
I did too.
Oh my god, bro, we are so in sync. But yes, Icecrown is, again, a phenomenal zone to play through, but outside of the major quest line with the Lich King and some of the stuff that you do leading up to the actual sieging of Icecrown, a lot of the things that you do kind of feel like side stories. And that's fine, because, I mean, I think every expansion needs side stories, but the Lich King's aura alone is what puts it all the way up here. The lore implications of everything that Warcraft 3 and the Plaguelands in Classic and everything like that has led up to was this moment, and it feels like such a grandiose culmination of it to actually get to experience walking through Icecrown. And even the smaller, like I was kind of saying, B stories of like Sindragosa and her whole links all the way back to the War of the Ancients and Malygos and everything like that. The Quell de Lar quest line, it is so just crammed full of so many things that even if some of them do feel like side plots, even some of those side plots feel super significant in the grand scheme of everything.
Yeah, man. I mean, I did too for Icecrown, partly because I think the number 1 spot has implications for greater and longer story past what Icecrown does. But I mean, dude, you got Icecrown Citadel, the Serenite Castle, home of the Lich King, whatever Lich King it is, whether it be Arthas, whether it be Bolvar. Multiple fights have happened there. You reminded me, Kael'thas fought Arthas there. Illidan fought Arthas there. So pretty cool fights happening at that place. Sindragosa's fall, I mean, you got where Sindragosa died and then Lich King reanimated it to fight for him, which is one of the, I remember that cinematic still to this day, and it screaming, and then all the army of the dead screaming after, and it has the blue coming out. I talked about the Shadow Vault, but that's like still a base of operation for the Knights of the Ebon Blade. I'm pretty sure they're still kicking it there. And then I guess you have a little bit of lore with the Argent Tournament too. One of the times that the Alliance and the Horde have gotten together.
It builds off of a lot of what has led up to this like moment, obviously, but it really does feel like the grand cacophony, if you will, of the whole Wrath of the Lich King story. And it like the lore behind Arthas is, I think, really good, especially with how it mixes with the gameplay, because we knew all of this time of who Arthas was and like the terrible things he had done. So when you actually come face to face with him during a lot of this experience, it just feels so menacing. And I mean, he's one of the probably the most iconic Warcraft villain for a reason. His story is amazing. Tyrion Fordring and his story with the Ashbringer and everything that leads up to it is also quite good in my opinion. But yeah, this is where a lot of it comes to its culmination, and it's hard to not place it all the way up here. But it's not quite number 1. And we did also agree once again, yes, I think that the Storm Peaks has the greatest lore in all of Wrath of the Lich King. I'm gonna let you take it away for this one. Why is Storm Peaks number 1?
Well, Titan influence is something that at the time I didn't look too much into. You know, I thought I didn't really know what was happening back in the time, right? When it was current. But now, looking back, we can see Titan influence in many expansions, and really they're the creators, it seems like, in some cases, right? In the whole story arc of the War Within to Midnight to the Last Titan, it's in the name, the Last Titan, they've played a part in either universe shaping or corrupting worlds. We don't know, right? All we know is they seem like they want to help, but what is their end goal? And we're still trying to figure out that end goal, but they have played a part in the overarching story of Azeroth, right? Azeroth is potentially a sleeping titan, right? And that's trying to get reawakened. And what will happen if or when Azeroth gets awakened? We don't know, but there's a lot of hinting towards it and foreshadowing, and the Titans just play a huge part in the story of Azeroth, right?
Yep. I mean, you said a lot of it. I think a lot of it really comes down to Yogg-Saron and just how much the story of the Titans and the old gods is so ancient, and how it has like seemingly been like this grand galactic battle over these however countless millennia, and we're here just witnessing one moment of it, because there's just so much lore that leads into Ulduar, and there's so much lore that leads into the Titan Keepers and Loken, and the stealing of the discs of Norganon by Tyr, when he eventually will take all of the what will eventually become mortal races of Azeroth out into the world. And it's hard to say that there is anything in the lore that is more significant up to this point than Ulduar and the Storm Peaks. Like, some of the stuff is kind of like fluff, like we mentioned with some of the Frost Reichel storylines that lead into meeting with Thorum and stuff like that, isn't really super relevant to the grand scheme of everything. But even that has like ties into the Valkyr, and the Valkyr have ties that go all the way into Legion in the future, and the fucking Shadowlands, and just, it is kind of the not first time, but where we are really confronted with just how grand of a scale that we're going to be operating on.
Oh, and I guess Yogg-Saron and the Curse of Flesh too. If that never happened, free will probably would have never happened, and people would just have their way with Azeroth, right? If we weren't protecting it a lot of the time.
Yep.
Like, there's an argument going on. I don't know if you heard of this argument recently. Is, were the old gods actually trying to help? It seems that the old gods were sent here by the Void Lords to corrupt, take over, destroy Azeroth, right? But it seems they've actually helped us protect it. And people are saying that Azeroth, the sleeping titan that I'm talking about, can actually influence your thoughts and make you do different things. And is Azeroth influencing the old gods, right? Because they were sent to kill or take over or whatever, corrupt Azeroth. So there's a lot of questions going on right now as well.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of like we've been saying, how big of a story of Ulduar and the Storm Peaks, and this kind of start off point for this galactic scale story that we will see bleed into every single expansion following it, and way into even our future. We've yet to see these next two expansions, which were most definitely going to be heavily Titan influenced. So we're gonna see where all of that ends up. But yep, so just to read it down from bottom to top in terms of worst to best, at the worst spot we have Crystal Song Forest, followed by Zuldrak, Sholazar Basin, Grizzly Hills, Howling Fjord, Borean Tundra, Dragonblight, Icecrown, and the best lore experience in Wrath being the Storm Peaks.
And mine from worst to best was Crystal Song Forest, Zuldrak, Howling Fjord, Grizzly Hills, Borean Tundra, Sholazar Basin, Dragonblight, Icecrown, and Storm Peaks being the best.
Alrighty, well, that is where we are going to finish off with today's episode. A huge episode. We definitely... Can you believe that I wrote out more stuff in case I thought that we would get through our lists too fast? But
no, I can't.
That was a good time. I really enjoyed that. What'd you think, Tim?
Yeah, it was good. Seeing where you had things for gameplay was interesting, seeing where I had things for lore was interesting. You could definitely see where some of our strengths lie.
Yes, indeed. But that is all that we have for you for today, guys. If you did make it this far and are enjoying the content, please make sure to drop us a like, a follow, a 5 stars on Spotify, whatever. Give us a comment about what you guys think in terms of your rankings for the zones. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this. So please let us know, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.